Prost.
Santé.
Skål.
Kampai.
Sláinte.
Cheers.
Hi everybody, this is Robert Ronk and welcome to the first episode of Durham Craft Beer Talk. It is the talk where we focus in on what is happening in craft beer here in Ontario and in Durham and around the world. Joining me is my co-host, James Hobbs. How are you today, James?
I'm good, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome.
I'm really excited to be here doing the show today. I'm excited about this project in general. I see myself as a great enthusiast, but by no means an expert, and I think that's what you bring to the table is more of an expert knowledge in craft beer.
Yeah, very kind words. I'm glad to be here, and obviously this industry is something exciting from, I guess you could call me an expert, to the enthusiast, to the average everyday guy who loves craft beer. It's a very exciting time to be alive for this right now.
No, it absolutely is, and I think that the growth in craft beer has been just phenomenal over the last couple of years. Tell me a little bit from an inside perspective of how you've seen craft beer grow and change.
Well, just through the tap and tanker, just over the years, you noticed people's palates changing. You notice there's more of a demand for a more localized beer. There's more education with great apps like Untapped and Instagram and Twitter that just makes the reach of everybody's brand and beer so much more popular nowadays. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And one of the things I find that's interesting to me is, and you touched on it, is taste changing over time. Mm-hmm. As a person who's in their 40s, I know when I started drinking in my late teens, basically kind of the only thing that was available broadly was lagers. You know, it was the Molson Canadians.
It was the big three.
The big three. Yeah, the big three lagers and a couple of variations from there. But it seemed to be that's what everybody drank. And now I honestly can't tell you the last time I drank a lager.
Yeah, it's becoming almost not extinct, but they're around. But there's so much more variety, so much more flavors out there that people are experimenting more. And it's one of those things that you just want to be a part of. You want to open up a new beer that you might get at the beer store, the liquor store, or your local bar, and be wowed. Like you've never had that before. Your palate's just like, wow, what is that? And that's becoming increasingly more popular. And it's just a great wave to be a part of right now.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing that I find is, and you touched on it with the creativity. I honestly, sometimes when I get a new beer that I've never tasted before, you really see that creative outlet coming through in the crafting of that beer because of the combinations of tastes and flavors. And, you know, at least in my mind, when I used to drink beer, I was drinking beer. And things like taste or, the finish or those sort of things were really what people spoke about when they talked about wine. Mm-hmm. And now more and more, this is the things that people are talking about in regards to craft beer. What are the notes that you're tasting? What is the finish on that? And I find that that's a really interesting evolution.
And I'm glad you touched on wine. I know this is a craft beer show, but I feel like wine has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and so is beer. But beer hasn't reached that type of quality and reach that wine has. And now you're almost seeing with new brewers and especially with bars, they're always trying to find that unique beer now, which is like wine. Even today, you have beers that have been, in the cellar for barrel aging now, which might have been done on an underground type of industry. Now it's, with local brands like Bellwoods in Toronto really trying to push the limit of barrel aging and not just letting it sit in the fermenter and in 10 days turn it over. You have these craft brewers who are actually pushing the envelope now on what they can do with that style of beer, and it's almost coming back to how people ferment their wine over years. And you're getting excited about trying a barrel aged beer now, whereas before that didn't happen.
Well, yeah,
it was the real hardcore beer enthusiasts, and now you have people that are in their early 20s all the way up to their 50s looking for these styles of beer now, which is amazing.
One of the things that really has to me, been the beer style maybe that's succeeded the most so far in the craft market is the IPA. Do you see, obviously, I think you would agree that probably the highest percentage of craft beers are now IPAs. Is that correct?
Yeah.
For the most part?
It's definitely a variation of IPAs.
Right.
You have your traditional IPA, which is your India Pale Lager or Pale Ale, but then you have these American Pale Ales. You have variations of, people dumping a lot of hops into it, making it very, hoppy and
like a double hop or
like
a wet hop.
Yeah, and you have then the single hopped or the wet hopped and different variations where you're not overly exhuming people for their hops, and there's a nice finish on the back end there, and you're not drinking a pine tree like some people have described it. But I don't hear that much anymore with the evolution of craft beer. Now you have other types of IPAs where people are drinking them, and they're using them as session lagers now.
Right.
You can get them in a 3.5% to 4.5%. Like a big IPA doesn't have to be 6-7% for you to get those flavors now.
Right.
So it's with the craft brewers now that they're using that model, and they're moving it around and they're becoming very creative brewmasters now.
So I hear the whole evolution of taste, and we've all sort of progressed past maybe those first beers that we started drinking. What do you think has really pushed it? What was the catalyst to get that going? Is there a particular brewer? Was there a particular style? What really lit that fuse that let this go?
I think the demand's always been there. The reach hasn't been as easy. You have obviously the big three who own the beer store, and with the LCBO being a government-run agency, there's not a lot of creativeness that can happen to get your liquid. That's why homebrewing was so popular in the late 80s, 90s, and now it's becoming these craft breweries who have been around for a while, like Great Lakes, like Muskoka, like Mill Street, who really put the craft industry on the forefront and said you can get really good liquids locally. And it's been those brands, those pioneers, I would say, even Wellington and Cameron's on the west side of Toronto there, who have on a local of in Ontario, in the GTA, have been really just doing their thing, just refining their craft, refining their quality. And it was eventually with I would say, social media and with everybody's knowledge of what good beer is and what you can have that kind of broke down that wall.
Right.
And then once it gets into the public's hands, it's just they're demanding better beer. They're demanding high quality, different beer, not just your generic lagers or ales. They want something different, which has been fueling this industry for a good 15, 20 years now. And now we're starting to really see the benefits of it.
So would you say that when this started, so it really started to catch steam 15, 20 years ago, was it that people who had been doing the home brewing in the 80s and 90s and had got their art to a form where it was not, I'm drinking a homebrew beer, to I'm drinking a really good beer? Was it those people who just loved making beer and loved beer themselves that turned it into a business, or do you think it was people who saw this as a business potential and went out and found people who could brew beer?
I think it's kind of a mixture of both. I feel like the passionate people who just love beer for beer, and they would homebrew, they would make their beer at home with their buddies, beer clubs. I know in Durham region, that's how some of the local brewers have actually started. It was a bunch of guys doing homebrews, and people look at each other, they're like, hey, we're pretty talented at this, let's forge a business model, which has happened on a small scale, and it's happened on a larger scale where you do have people of the big companies that are looking at this as a very potential growth in an industry. And you have some people with their passions, and then you mix them up with the financial means to make it happen. And you have a lot of companies that are starting up that aren't acting like a small company. They are acting like big budget beer companies, but it's still craft. You're still getting that uniqueness, that different palate, something different on a local scale.
Fantastic. So what do you see as some of the aims of this show? I mean, in my mind, I'm a beer lover. I'm a beer enthusiast. I love seeing the growth of craft beer, and I love personally I love experimenting. So
As we all do.
So I mean, for me, one of the aims of doing this show is making sure that we're bringing knowledge to people who are listening to the show, who also want to go through that experiment of really finding some interesting different taste profiles. What else do you think that this can bring from a knowledge perspective to people, to get them out of that rut of maybe they're still drinking Coors Light, or they're still drinking maybe a more traditionally made beer, to push them into trying some craft?
Mm-hmm. Great question. And what we had talked about with even starting this craft beer show is we want to let people know what's more local, what's people can get. You just don't have to go to the beer store or the LCBO. There's some fantastic breweries opening in Durham region all over the place, between Manantler and Bowmanville, Brock Street and Whitby, Five Paddles and Whitby, Old Flame and Port Perry, Second Wedge and Uxbridge. You can get great beer at the source now. You don't have to go to the big boxes. You can actually go in, talk with your local brewer. You can get to know them on a very close scale, get to know what they're making next. That, I think, is the purpose of this show, is to let people know the reach can get to the brewers, to the owners of these companies, to see the enthusiasm that there's out there. I mean, enough for two guys to start a radio show about it and talk about craft beer in a more local, general sense, rather than worldwide or North America. There's great talent happening around us, and I feel like there needs to be a voice that we need to get out there to let people know about these new breweries, these new beers, not just their one brand or two brands. These people are they're brewing every day. They're filling up those tanks. They're trying their craft on a new age type of palate right now.
Right.
And it's fantastic to be a part of. It's kind of like going to a new restaurant that the chef's making this awesome food. That's what we have with brewmasters and these new breweries. And it's just fantastic to think about and try to voice that out to the public so they can know where to get this type of beer, the styles of beer, what restaurants are pushing these, which restaurants have gone more craft. There's just a brewery that opened in Ajax over the weekend, Falcon. These are places that you can get it right from the source, and this is what I think we're here for, is to give the public knowledge about what's happening in the area.
Right.
I think it's fantastic.
No, and that's a perfect segue. I was at the opening for Falcon on Friday, and I have to say I was impressed. So they used to be known as the Stouffville Brewery.
Yeah.
So they've rebranded Falcon. They've moved into Ajax because they couldn't find a place in Stouffville. As I was speaking with the owner briefly around that, they were having some problems, and they just wanted to be somewhere within the Durham region. Found a nice location with some parking. I know it used to be something else. It's not a brand new building. I couldn't remember what it was. It almost looks like it was a fast food location or a restaurant location that was there previously. So maybe somebody who's listening to the show and is a bit of a historian as what used to be there can let us know.
Yeah, they can let us know. Drop us an email.
But they're launching the brewery with a location. They're going to be having food in there. That's not quite ready. In speaking with Jim, that's probably a couple of weeks away. And in the next week or two, as that happens, we will be doing an interview with Jim to talk about the brewery, what got them there, and a little bit of the history. They're launching with 10 beers, a pretty wide cross-section of flavors. 9 of them were ready. One, their double hop IPA is not...
Is that your favorite one?
It's not ready yet, so I didn't get a chance to try it. But yes, that most likely would have been. So I had a chance to taste 5 of them, and I have to say, what struck me is they were all well-crafted beers. Not everything is going to be to your taste palette, and I'll stress on every single show when I talk about any of the local breweries, there's no personal animus. It's all personal taste. There'll be things that you like and things that you don't. So 1 or 2 of the varieties weren't my personal taste, but they they seemed well crafted. In a person who's drank a lot of craft beer, I would say that if that was a style that you liked, you would have enjoyed the beer. There was no sort of construction issues when it came to the beer itself.
More of a focus on the actual craft, quality.
Yeah, it seemed like a good quality. Yeah, good quality beer made well, but then it just, that one particularly didn't grab me. The standout for me in the 5 varieties that I tasted was their IPA. Finally IPA, I thought was very well done, very well crafted, and actually quite delicious. And like you said, you can go to the source nowadays and buy them, and they're selling them in bottles, they're selling them in growlers, so it is definitely something that people can easily drop in and check out. Any other local brewers, things happening right now that you're excited about coming into the spring season? There is a batch of new seasonal beers being released. Anything from the local brewers that you're excited about coming out right now?
Well, on a more local standpoint here, Five Paddles within Whitby, who their styles are all over the map, which is probably their strongest attribute as a brewery. That's kind of something that they wanted to do. They don't want to do the same beer all the time.
Right.
Which is, if you have the passion and you are your own boss and you started your own brewery, then good on you.
Right.
That's what you can do. That's what they saw as a niche in their market, and it's worked out fantastic for them. They have their Home Sweet Home, which is now available in the LCBO. That's their winner. I believe they are just got in another beer to the LCBO, their Italian Backyard, which is their basil beer.
Oh, okay.
Which is something that I'm sure they didn't expect that would get accepted at the LCBO. But it's something very unique and something that people are sodding after, or they're trying to find, they're trying to seek out, because it's a unique beer. And the LCBO is probably seeing this as, hey, this could be a very different growth opportunity for us. I know that they're always working on different beers. They just came out with their Sour Pucker, which did very well. Sour beers, I feel like, are going to be this summer's cider. It was a couple of years ago.
Or what I think, what I'm seeing more and more is, I think the sour beer is going to be this year's Radler.
Yeah, 100%.
So Radler came out of nowhere, I think, last year, and everybody seemed to have a Radler. No one ever drank one before, and then everybody was drinking them last summer. And I agree with you. I think that sour beer is going to take up that place this year.
Something refreshing. You're in a hot sun, and something light in alcohol, 3-4%. Mm-hmm. That's something where this craft industry, probably 10 years, nobody thought it would be going that way. But you're changing palates. Somebody that drank a Coors Light or a Rickards 10 years ago is probably drinking these different styles of beers now, because their palates are diversifying. They're changing after every different beer they have.
Well, and I would say that it's not even necessarily sometimes that the palate's changing, it's that it was never on an option for them.
That's very true.
And now I walk into a place like the Tap, and I have, 25, 30 different craft beer possibilities outside of the ordinary, and I think that it's something that can be exciting. It can be daunting also to somebody who I've never tried one. I don't know anything about it. What is that toe in the water? So I'll bring it into the Tap, and just in case it isn't clear, James is the general manager of the Tap and Tankard in downtown Whitby, and the Tap, correct me if I'm wrong, has the largest number of craft beers taps.
Yeah, we have 42 taps, around 20 to 25 at any given time are craft.
Right.
I try to go as local as possible, but I also try to bring in different styles of beers from all over Ontario. You almost have this industry that's creating beer brokers, where you have some other companies that are pairing up with bigger companies. I know Beau's Brewery, just outside of Ottawa there, they actually will deliver for very small microbreweries who don't have the reach, don't have the logistics to get their beer, but their program is about giving people better beer, which is fantastic. And not a lot of people know that. And it's getting that reach of that smaller craft brewer out to, say, Durham region, Whitby area, Where as an owner operator, I can taste a different beer and go, oh, you know what, that's pretty good.
Right.
Well, I think my customer base will really enjoy that. Let's put that on tap. Let's see how it does. And the best thing about beer is there's not a big commitment. It comes in 20 and 30 liter kegs. It's not that hard to get people to try some samples of some different beers, some summertime beers, some stouts, some porters. Flights are a big thing for most restaurants now that have a good tap selection, to get people to, to try a 6-ounce sample, not a 20-ounce pint. That's a lot of commitment to people these days, especially in this type of society that we have. Where it's, look at a picture and go. So with that, I found is, allowing sample boards and allowing people to try different things. It's opening up different palettes. People are sharing at tables.
Right.
It's become a fun thing.
Yeah.
And it's usually with people that haven't tried a beer from that brewery before or hadn't heard of them. And that's when the education process of your staff really kicks in to let them know. I believe that happened last year when we had a creamsicle ale from Railway City on. And I do remember sampling it to yourself.
Yes, indeed.
And I think it became your summer beer last year.
I believe I drank most of the 30-liter keg that you had.
I know William Street Landing in Coburg also has the orange creamsicle ale.
So, Railside, if you are listening, please bring back creamsicle ale this summer. Please bring it back.
It was dynamite. It was like dessert in a pint.
It was refreshing.
Phenomenal. You could have definitely more than one, and you don't have that over fruit feeling. There was a lot of beer texture to it, and it was very satisfying.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that beer up, because to me that is one of those beers where on the board I was looking at that going, I don't know. I don't even like a slice of orange in my beer. This is probably
some people will say is a faux pas. You
do not put fruit in beer. Like, if you have to put fruit in beer, then there's something wrong with the construction of the beer. That's the way I see it. So I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't know. I think I can't see me liking it. It's going to be too much flavor. And you bringing over a sample and saying, no, give it a try. It's really good. I'm really enjoying it. And just hooked. And I think, we spent altogether too much time out in the back patio drinking all of it that you had in stock.
It was a beer that went very, very well here for the summer. And it was one of those things where you just get people to sample it, try it. And you can be hooked. And I think that's kind of like most beers now. There's such a good quality behind them now that you're more willing to try something, because you know that the technology and the quality and consistency is there from these craft brewers, where you're going to give that different beer that you would never see on a chalkboard. You're going to give it a chance to sample it, and you're probably going to be very surprised with most beers. It's one of those things that, just because you don't understand the name of it or the style of beer, you give it a sample, you give it a try, and most people will go, wow, that's delicious. Sometimes you're like, oh, okay, that's not for my palate. But that's the fun about this industry, and it's the fun about all these new brewers coming up, is just, you're trying things that you probably wouldn't have thought you would have had at dinner probably 10 years ago.
Honestly, and one of the things that you have on tap right now, which I keep drinking every time I come in, is the Nickelbrook Sour. Right? To your earlier point on the sours, it's just a nice, refreshing beer to drink when I'm coming in. It's not heavily alcoholed, so I can have a couple, and it's got a clean finish, and I really like it. And to me, everybody who I've had try it, because they're drinking, I'm like, what are you drinking? And I'm like, oh, try a sip. It's something completely out of the taste palette that they've ever tried before.
Oh, yeah.
And
for sure.
Some people love that, and some people are like, I don't know if I could get through a whole pint, but to me, it was fantastic.
Well, I remember when we first put it on a few weeks ago, I believe, and we host a run group through the tap every Wednesday. It's called the Durham Craft Beer Run, which has a membership of 75 to 100 runners. This was the first year we actually did it through the winter. So we do get a fair amount of runners, and after each run we sample another one of those things, just try different beers, see what you like. And I do, the sour from Nickelbrook stood out to me as one of the most popular brands we have sampled lately. Maybe because people just did a 5K run,
Right.
But they were in dire need of some thirst quenching, and the sour just went with their palate at that time, and that's why I keep coming back to sours being probably the spring summer's biggest breadwinners, because there's, it's a different type of style of beer, and it's the summertime. It goes with the whole, being in the Toronto side of things,
right.
And there's so much going on, and you have all these brands, these sours that are just gonna be on patios everywhere, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't foresee them not being on patios, and if you're a beer lover, you're probably going to really embrace this.
Yeah, I could definitely see it being a really good summer drink. Of course, unless Crimson Cow comes back.
Yes, which would definitely be out there. But you have like brands like even Bellwoods, who have always been doing. I keep going back to Bellwoods, but it's one of those. They've been doing sours. They've been experimenting. Yeah. I know Nickelbrook and Collective Arts. They have a whole sour section in the brewery. You're seeing it more and more. Becoming more popular as we go here, because there's a demand for it. People are drinking it.
Right.
I mean, I just did a brewery tour of Toronto last week, and we went to Reinhard, which is in the rail yards. We went to Blood Brothers. We went to Foley Brew Pub, and every menu had a sour beer.
Right.
There was a sour stout or a sour IPA or something along those lines. And to go to different breweries and see everybody's doing a sour, you have to kind of look at what everybody's doing and go, okay, something's happening right now.
Right.
And, the demand's there, so
interesting.
Keep brewing it.
So what else are you excited about in here right now? I mean, I pull out the sour as an example of something I'm excited about here on tap right now. What else do you have on tap right now that you're excited about, that you think people should come in and give a shot to?
I mean, we just got through St. Patrick's Day, so that was a nice, fun time. But with that comes out a lot of porters and stouts and different styles, just rather than your basic Guinness or something like that, which I love Guinness, so there's a disclaimer there. But you get to talk to all the local breweries and what they're coming up with, and are they putting spins on stouts. And I know we just had the Muskoka Coco Lay, which was a raspberry stout. And it's just taking that everybody's kind of in the stout wines, because Guinness has trained everybody for many years to get pumped up for St. Patrick's Day. And you have all these other craft breweries that are, okay, we can do a stout, but we're going to do something different. We're going to, throw some chocolate in it, or we're going to put raspberries, or we're going to do it in a milk stout or a porter. And they're doing it in a way where everybody's focused on Guinness at this time, but for bars that have the tap room and that want to always rotate their taps, you can throw these other stouts on that people are more inclined to try at this time of year, because it's
the variety is in their mind. Yeah. I'm going to drink a stout, I'm going to drink a porter. It's that time of the year, so I can drink the traditional Guinness, or I can roll the dice on trying this other variety that may throw in a bit of a curveball of the chocolate or the raspberry. And
what we do at the tap is just to fulfill those needs, is to really have that variety for somebody to coming in for dinner or for lunch or just for some pints. You want somebody to look at your beer Bible, as we call it,
right?
To look at it and see something that they might not have had before, or they've had somewhere else, and oh man, I can't get that anywhere else. I can only get that here, or I can only get that in this location.
Right.
So that's what we really try to do at the tap, is to try to build the brand of all the brewers and all the different styles that they actually do, rather than just that one style that people might know them for.
Right.
With being a licensee and a bar owner, you can go right to the brewmaster and say, hey, I want to try this. Have you ever thought about doing something like this? And then, lo and behold, a couple months later or a couple weeks later, you could, there's your style there, and you can try it out, which is very unique. You never got that 15 years ago. You never could go.
That level of personalization, and where you're really able to sit down with somebody and say, hey, I think this, as a person who sells a lot of beer, I think this may work, and then really having somebody experiment with that. And the turnaround time, as you said, it's not a long time investment to do turnaround on something. Now, what would you say is one of the more unique beers that you've seen come through the tap so far this year?
So far this year? I keep going back to this Muskoka Raspberry Cocoa Lait, which is a milk stout. I find it's a little different than just your infused fruit stout or fruit beer. It's very strong on the tongue, whereas you're like, wow, okay, I'm getting some raspberries there. And then as you're drinking it, the raspberries don't go away. They're kind of staying with you the whole way, which is well balanced, a very easy to drink stout, which is coming in at 5.5% and very low IBUs. It's approachable for men and women. Everybody I've sampled it for, the run group, the other people, I really find that if you get somebody to try it, they're like, wow, I've never really had those types of flavors. Like, people have had raspberry whip beers, or they've had lager infused fruit beers, but to do a milk stout in the raspberry for Muskoka, I thought it was just dynamite. And at the same time, with Old Flame, they have a chocolate orange stout, which is kind of having them both on tap at the same time kind of makes it a little, okay, which one do you like better? Do you like the orange or the raspberry? Yeah. And a lot of people are loving the taste buds that are coming out of it. They're almost like dessert beers, but they're... Correct
me if I'm wrong, but I personally haven't tried the chocolate orange from Mantler, but somebody sort of described it to me as almost like a stout with a melted Terry's chocolate orange in it.
Yes,
okay.
Yep.
That's a fair,
very fair, pretty spot on actually.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to pick a different beer because to me, it just honestly the taste profile came out of nowhere when you put a sample in front of me, and that was the Bose Triceratops.
Oh, the Triceratops. That February, which was probably my most nerve-wracking beer we've thrown on tap in a while. And talking with Dave, our Bose representative out here, he was a little worried about the Triceratops being a gruit, being heavier alcohol. Yeah, we had to serve it in smaller glasses, obviously, but it was one of those beers that Bose is one of the leaders in the world actually of doing gruit beers, and it's just there's no hops. It's very floral style beer, and it was a very different style of beer. And I do remember when we sampled it was a different flavor profile that you're probably never gonna really attain.
It was a very interesting beer, and I can see this beer being very divisive when people are drinking it. I can see somebody taking a sip and absolutely loving it, and somebody taking a sip and going, nope, not for me.
Yeah, it's a all or nothing type beer. Yeah, that's for sure.
The interesting thing to me about it, and it hit me immediately right away when I had it, and I had it multiple times, so it wasn't just the one time. I purchased it a couple of times. I think I had it probably 3 pints of it over the time that it was on tap, and you took a drink, and it had just a good feel of beer. Like, it was an easy drinking beer. There was no harshness on it. But the aftertaste to me immediately was like it was almost like a Ricola. Like I had put a Ricola, mint in my mouth. Which, again, I think that's the part where it could be off-putting to people, and that could be a bit much. For me, I just really liked it. I thought it was so different and something that was out of the box compared to anything I had tried before, just when it came to the style and it came to the aftertaste of it.
And that was, in saying my most nerve-wracking beers I put on tap, because you have a higher alcohol percentage gruit beer with those different profiles in it. And I remember, because you're supposed to have every beer on for 1 week, and after a couple days, I think it was 4 or 5 days, it was done. Yeah. And that was the one keg of the whole February series that I was very concerned about. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know if I can, people are going to like this. I don't know if we can move this. And, that's what sparks this whole industry right now is you never know whose palate is drinking what now. And for somebody to have a few of them, you're like, oh, you do like it. They're like, yeah, this is something very unique. I've never had this before. And people, they're seeking out. They're emailing us. They're emailing Bose. They're trying to see what's next to come on tap. What's different like that. Right. And I think that was a huge program that Bose did. That I think they did 2 gruit styles on their month-long February campaign, and it gets that that different style of beer out there to somebody like yourself, like to another, customer in Whitby, Ontario. It's one of those things that, somebody in Ottawa had this idea. Let's try to, make this beer, and let's go a little heavier. Let's see what we can do. And then the public loves it, and it's fantastic to actually watch it kind of happen in front of you sometimes.
Right, and just I'll do a bit of a shameless plug, but if you want to keep up to date with the different beers and what's happening, and you're a beer lover, you should have downloaded the Untapped app by this point. If you have not, do yourself a favor, go do that right now. It's a fun, there's almost a level of gamification on, putting the beers that you love and connecting with friends.
Collecting your badges.
Collecting the badges and sharing with friends the different beers you're drinking, and maybe get some ideas for other things to try. But I know that you heavily use the Untapped app.
Yep.
And if you like the location and follow the tap itself, you're going to get updates when you've put new things on tap. So I get an alert that lets me know something new is up there, and I know to come in and try it before it disappears.
It's fantastic. When I talked to Untapped, when they were trying to launch a business side of it, they're like, you know what, we have verified venues. Would you like to become one of the verified venues? Because we can see all the check-ins from your bar already. And it just made sense. It allows the venue to now interact more with the customers, patrons, to see, what people are actually drinking, what they're rating the beers. They're connecting with other people, other restaurants. I know Daryl from Buster Rhinos in downtown Oshawa. He's a big component of Untapped and using craft beer as well, and using that to, connect with your customers and seeing what's actually happening. And as a business, you can update from your phone, and it comes to your phone of when we got something new on.
Absolutely.
It makes that, okay, we got to go there. We got to try this beer before it's done, because with these types of beers, they almost become consignment, where it's once they're gone, they're gone. So you have to use the social media in a way to really pump out what you're doing and what styles of beer they're here, because they're not going to be here for long.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's one of the things, especially with craft beer. I think that term of consignment is a perfect term. Like you may get a once in a lifetime chance to try this beer, and it's just not going to come around, because even if they put it off for another season, it may not taste the exact same.
Brewers are always refining the recipes.
That's right.
Trying
so
to make
there's
them better.
Always going to be something different about it. When we look going forward, I know we talked about the sour as being the big variety, but when we look backwards in the history of beer, beer making's been around for 4,000 years. They were brewing beer.
I think somebody left some bread outside one day in the yeast, and I believe from my chapter 1 beer sommelier course that's something I should know more off the top of my head.
Well, and the interesting thing is when you do look at that history of brewing, because it has been around for years, and I read an interesting story is that when most people say that people settled down and stopped being hunters and gatherers and started being farmers, the reason wasn't to have a stable crop for food, it was to have a stable crop to make alcohol. So
people had their priorities.
They had their priorities in life, for sure. So when we look at that, when I look around the world, they make beers with very different things. I mean, traditionally in North America, we're used to the holy trinity in 4 parts of the water, the hop, the malted barley, and the yeast, and that's sort of the backbone of probably about 95% of the beers that we drink.
Yeah.
But when we look around the world, when we look to Africa, when we look to India, when we look to Japan, they're using often very different products outside of those that main 4 ingredient. Do you see any, brewers in Ontario, at least, do you think that they'll get to a point where they're going to roll the dice on something really out of the box?
I think so. I kind of think that's already started to even get back on to Bose with the Gruit, where there's no hops.
True.
It's a very different style of beer that not a lot of people are trying. And I think as the technology and the agriculture and hop growers and everybody that's involved in this industry, as technology helps people get to do different things with their industries, I think you're going to see a huge not uprising, but almost a different type of revolution in this industry of, who can do it the most local, almost, who can be self-sustaining, who can, I know Cowbell up in Blythe they have their brewery that's being opened in the summer, where they have their own water supply. They have their own grain fields. They have their own hop farms. It's becoming, I see that as the future for the future of the craft brewers and
right.
the companies that really want to change the industry. They want to definitely not just brew like we've always traditionally brewed, but let's look at outside the box thinking of how can we get these liquids, but how can we use less water? How can we, be better for the environment type thing? And I really think that that's the next shift and the next focus of this industry. And it's only going to go as far as technology and, the entrepreneurs that want to do it.
Right. So we've talked a lot about other brewers. As we're getting towards the end of the show, I want to give you a little bit of time to talk about yourself. So beyond being the general manager of the Tap and Tankard, you are starting a new venture, and the new venture is well underway. So do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you can tell, both of us are pretty passionate about this industry, and I kind of saw it as a segue of maybe I should get involved in this. I love talking to brewmasters. I love talking to brewery owners, and you get this passion inside of you that you're like, maybe I should get involved. How can I get involved? And you know what? I was lucky to be in the right place, right time with some key people, some enthusiasts, some experts. And we're actually opening up, hopefully in the summer, a brewery called Town Brewery in Whitby Shores. So that's something that's been, some headaches, some exciting times. It's a process, but it's one that I grew up in Whitby. Obviously the Tap and Tankard is one of the staples in downtown Whitby. I felt like, Whitby Shores is kind of missing something. There needs to be somewhere unique, a destination spot down there. And in my industry, I saw a segue to getting into the craft brewery industry, and it was one of those things I didn't really want to get too involved with another restaurant, and a brewery seemed to be the right fit at the right time, and I pulled in these guys, and it's exciting. I'll definitely keep people updated as we go along here. The headaches, the cheersing, as you were, of the next accomplishment, and it's one of those things that the more people you talk about it with, even local breweries, there's an excitement because they want more people. They want more people drinking craft beer in the area. They want more people doing it right, enjoying the quality and consistency of a pint in your own town. And
right.
It goes back to you're creating more jobs. You're helping the town be on the map, and Whitby's kind of going through this growth opportunity. We're right up to Brooklyn, to downtown Whitby, to Whitby Shores. There's a big focus, and for me, it was just let's be a part of it. Let's be with Five Paddles and Brock Street, the local breweries, and let's kind of have this Whitby as a destination place to be on the east side of Toronto. It's exciting to be a part of that.
Right. And every week as we're doing the show, we'll get a bit of an update as to where you guys are in that process. And especially as we get closer to launch date, we'll get to know when things are actually starting to get brewing and get moving, and talk a little bit about the whole construction of where you're at. Yeah, for sure. Once the tanks get delivered, I'm sure we'll be chatting about that if they're coming this week. If it's been delayed, you never know with construction, but it's one of those things you just have to be prepared for everything and have it with an open mindset, which I think we have, and we're doing it the right way because we don't want to rush some things, but we want it to be unique for Whitby. We want people to really enjoy themselves when they're tasting a good local beer, and that's been the focus from day one of this year and a half project idea that we had, and now it's starting to really come together right now, which I'm very proud of. Perfect. That's great. Well, we're closing in on the end of the show, so I just want to say thank you, James. This was great as always. Cheers, and thank you all for listening, and tune in again next week where we'll talk more about beer. Sounds good. Take care. Okay.